The night my husband told me I was the reason we couldn't have a baby, I was holding a casserole dish that had been my mother's. White stoneware, hairline crack along the rim from the time I dropped it in 2019. I remember that detail because I remember staring at the crack while he talked. The way you stare at one specific tile in the bathroom when something is happening that your body isn't ready to feel yet. We were in our kitchen in Wilmette, just outside Chicago. Tuesday night. I had made a chicken and rice thing because he'd been distant for weeks, and I thought maybe a real dinner, the kind we used to have on Sundays, before everything got expensive and fast, would help. He didn't sit down. He stood by the island in his tie, still knotted, briefcase by his feet like he was waiting for a train, and he said it the way a man tells his wife the dishwasher is broken. I went to a specialist. The problem is you, your body. We've been trying for almost 2 years, and the numbers don't lie. You can't carry a child. You won't ever carry a child. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I've replayed it 1,000 times and I still don't fully understand the woman I was in that moment. I didn't cry. I didn't drop the dish. I set it down very slowly on the trivet the way you set down something that belongs to someone you love. Then I asked him, calm as anything, which specialist? He blinked. He hadn't expected a question. He'd expected tears. I think he'd rehearsed for tears. Dr. Reinhardt. In the city. When? Couple weeks ago. I didn't want to upset you until I was sure. He picked up his briefcase and walked to his office down the hall and shut the door, and I stood there in my own kitchen with chicken and rice, cooling on the stove, and I understood, in a quiet way that wasn't quiet at all, that my husband had just lied to me. I knew because I am a person who works with numbers for a living. I'm a forensic accountant. I've spent 15 years finding the exact place where a story stops adding up, and his story didn't add up in 3 places before he even left the room. 1. We had been to a fertility clinic together, both of us, 8 months earlier. Both tested. Doctor told us, both of us in the room, that there was no clear cause and we should keep trying. There was no follow-up scheduled. There was no second round of tests on the calendar. 2. Dr. Tive. Reinhardt was not a name I had heard before in our conversations, not from his coworkers, not from his mother who tracks his physical exams like she's running surveillance. 3. My husband does not make medical decisions without telling me. He has called me from a parking lot to ask if he should switch deodorants. He does not, on his own initiative, drive into the city to see a fertility specialist and then deliver the verdict over a casserole. I scraped the chicken into Tupperware. I washed the dish. I put on the rubber gloves my mother always wore when she did the dishes. The ones she said kept her hands looking 30 when she was 60, and I let myself stand at that sink for a long time. I let it be quiet. Then I went upstairs, sat on the edge of our bed, and I made a decision. I was going to find out what was actually happening in my marriage, and I was not going to tell him I was looking. My husband's name is Reed. He's a regional director at a commercial real estate firm in the Loop. We've been married 11 years. I'm 38, he's 42, and we met at a friend's wedding in Lake Geneva when I was 26 and he caught me crying in the parking lot because my date had ditched me for the bridesmaid. He gave me his jacket. He drove me back to my hotel. He didn't try anything. I thought, this one is different. I was right and wrong about that in ways that took me a decade to understand. The first thing I did, the morning after, was call Dr. Reinhardt's office, not as his wife, as a new patient. I asked if Dr. Reinhardt was taking new male fertility patients, and they said yes, he was, and his earliest opening was in 6 weeks. I asked if any patient could request copies of their own records, and they walked me through the release process. Polite, helpful, no reason to lie to me. I thanked them and hung up and sat in my car in the Whole Foods parking lot and stared at the steering wheel and thought, Okay. Okay. He didn't go to Dr. Reinhardt either. Or if he did, it wasn't for the reason he said. The second thing I did was harder. I called my friend Kara, who's a nurse practitioner at Northwestern, and I asked her, theoretically, if a man wanted to fake a fertility diagnosis for his wife, what would he need? She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I said, "I will be." She told me what to look for. Letterhead, signatures, lab logos. She told me real fertility reports have specific formats and reference ranges, and you can spot a fake one in about 30 seconds if you know what you're looking for. She also told me, more carefully, that men who do this kind of thing usually do it because there's another woman. And she was sorry, and did I need a place to stay? I told her no. I told her I needed to be in my house, with my eyes open, until I knew everything. The next 8 weeks were the strangest weeks of my life. Reed acted like a man who had just delivered hard news with grace. He was tender in this performative way, would touch my shoulder when he passed me in the hallway, would ask if I'd talked to anyone, would say things like, "We'll get through this. It doesn't define us." And every word was a brick in a wall he was building between us, and I could see him laying them, and I would say thank you, and I would touch his hand back, and I would go upstairs and write it all down in a notebook I kept inside an old tax law textbook on the bottom shelf of my home office. Things I noticed, he started leaving his phone face down. Always. Even in the bathroom. He had a new gym he was going to. Not our gym. A different one in the West Loop. He went 3 nights a week and came home freshly showered and didn't smell like our soap. He bought new underwear. Black boxer briefs, expensive, from a brand he had never worn in his life. I found the package in the recycling under a pile of cereal boxes. His credit card statements, which we share access to because I do our taxes, started showing charges I didn't recognize. A wine bar in River North. A flower shop on Damen. A jewelry store in Bucktown, $436 in early March, and I had not received any jewelry. He stopped initiating sex. He had also stopped sleeping facing me. He slept on his side, back to me, like a man holding a door shut. And one night, late, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him in the guest bathroom on a phone call, voice low, and I heard him say, "I told her, it's done. Just give me a few more weeks." I lay there in the dark with my eyes open, and I thought, a few more weeks until what? I started keeping copies of everything. I scanned his credit card statements before I filed them. I photographed receipts I found in his coat pockets. I did not break into his email, because Kara had told me, very firmly, that anything I obtained illegally would be useless to me later, and Kara was the only person in the world who knew. And I was going to listen to Kara. What I did do was perfectly legal. I requested my own records from our joint fertility clinic. They came in a manila envelope a week later. I sat at my dining room table and read every page. My results were normal, mildly diminished ovarian reserve, which is common at 38, but no infertility diagnosis. The doctor's notes from our last appointment said, verbatim, that we should continue trying naturally for another 6 months and reassess. There was nothing in those records that supported what Reed had told me in the kitchen. Then I made an appointment with my own OB. I told her what was happening. I cried in her office, the first time I had cried about any of it, and she held my hand and said, "You have time. Your body is fine. This man is lying to you." She ordered a full workup anyway, more comprehensive than anything we'd done at the clinic. The results came back 10 days later. I was in better reproductive health than the average woman my age. I didn't tell Reed. I sat with that piece of paper in my office, and I felt something shift in my chest that I want to call rage, but it was older than rage. It was the feeling you get when you realize you have been treated like you were stupid by someone who pledged to know you. It was the feeling of being made small by a man who promised, in front of my father and a Lutheran minister, to make me larger. In the 7th week, I found her. I wasn't looking exactly. I was at a coffee shop near his office, trying to get some work done because our house had started to feel like a stage set, and I saw him through the window. He was crossing the street with a woman. Mid-30s, dark hair, navy coat. She was laughing at something he said. He had his hand on the small of her back, not in a polite way. In the way he used to put his hand on the small of my back when we were first married. She was visibly pregnant. Not enormous yet, but unmistakable. The coat fell open when she turned and there was the curve, the high round 4 or 5 months along. I sat in that coffee shop and I did not move for a long time. My latte got cold. My laptop went to sleep. I watched them disappear into a building down the block, and I sat there with my hands on the table, and I felt something I had not felt in 8 weeks of cold methodical work, which was that I wanted to walk into Lake Michigan in my coat. I didn't. I went home. I took a long shower. I called Kara and I told her, and Kara said, "Okay. So now we know. What do you want to do?" What I wanted to do, I told her, was finish. Her name was Kendra Voss. I figured it out by being patient. I followed Reed's calendar, which we shared because we'd always shared it. And 3 weeks after the coffee shop, I noticed a recurring lunch every Wednesday labeled Voss Site Visit. I looked her up on the firm's website. She was a senior associate in their downtown office, hired about a year and a half ago, 2 months before Reed started getting strange. I want to say something here. I do not believe Kendra Voss is the villain of this story. I have thought about her a lot. I think she is a woman who got involved with a married man who told her he was unhappy, who told her his wife was cold, who told her his wife couldn't give him children, which is the part that broke something in me when I figured out the timeline. He had told her I was barren before he told me. He had been laying that brick longer than I had thought. Maybe he believed it. Maybe he had convinced himself by the time he said it to me. I don't know. I'm not in his head and I don't want to be anymore. I'm not gonna call her his mistress for the rest of this. I'm gonna call her Kendra. She made her own choices and they were not good ones. But Reed was the one who stood at our altar. By the end of the 8th week, I had everything. I had my medical records. I had his credit card statements. I had photos. I had a private investigator's report that I'd commissioned, paid for in cash from my personal account, that documented his pattern of meetings, his pattern of overnights at a hotel in River North on the nights he said he was at the gym. I had, finally, copies of Dr. Reinhardt's report that he'd left in his desk drawer in his home office, photographed on a Saturday morning when he went out for a run. The letterhead was wrong. The doctor's signature didn't match the actual Dr. Reinhardt's signature, which is on the website. The lab logo was a stock image. Kara was right. It took me about 30 seconds. He had forged a fertility report to convince me I was broken so that he could leave me cleanly, with everyone's sympathy for the woman carrying his child. I want to tell you about the dinner. His firm has an annual partners dinner every year in May at a steakhouse called Vermilion on Wabash, the kind of place with leather banquettes and a wine list bound in a small book. I had been to this dinner every year for 9 years, spouses included. Reed had told me 3 weeks earlier that I didn't need to come this year, that he understood if I wasn't up for it, given everything we were going through, and I had said in my softest voice, "No, honey, I want to come. I want to be there for you." He had not been able to find a way to tell me not to come without seeming suspicious. The week before the dinner, I went to a salon in Evanston I had never been to and got my hair done. Not my usual cut. Something sharper. I bought a black dress at Nordstrom that cost more than I usually spend, and I bought it without trying it on because I knew what I wanted. I had my nails done. I had not had my nails done in 9 months, since before any of this started, and the woman at the salon asked me if I was celebrating something, and I said, "Yes. Actually, I think I am." The morning of the dinner, I walked into the office of an attorney named Joel Brennan in the Loop, a man Kara had recommended, and I signed the papers he had drawn up for me over the previous 2 weeks. Petition for divorce. Citing adultery, with documentation. Asset disclosures, with documentation, including 3 accounts I had found in Reed's name that he had never told me about. Joel told me I was one of the most prepared clients he had ever worked with. I told him I was an accountant and I had been paying attention. The papers were sealed in a manila envelope. I put the envelope in my purse. I picked Reed up at his office that evening, and he kissed me on the cheek and told me I looked beautiful, and I told him thank you, and we drove to Vermilion, and the whole way there I felt very still, like the surface of a pond before any wind. I was not nervous. I had stopped being nervous somewhere around week 6. We were seated at a long table in the back, 12 people, the firm's partners and their spouses. Reed was at one end. I was at his right. Across from me was a partner named Doug Halverson, a man I had always liked, who asked how I was doing and I said, "Fine, Doug, I'm fine. How's your daughter?" We talked about his daughter through the appetizer. Reed was animated, working the table, telling a story about a deal he'd just closed, and I watched him with the kind of distant fondness you might feel watching a movie you used to love. Then the door opened and Kendra walked in. She was on the arm of one of the junior partners, a man named Alex, who I think had been told she was his date for the night because the firm liked to pair up associates and partners at events to make associates feel valued. She was in a gray dress that did not hide the pregnancy at all, was in fact designed to flatter it, and she walked into that dining room, and her eyes met Reed's across the table, and I saw him flinch. He had not known she would be there. She had not known I would be there. She had not known I would be there. Alex pulled her chair out 2 seats down from us, on Reed's side of the table. She sat. She did not look at me. She looked at her napkin. Her hand, I noticed, was shaking very slightly when she lifted her water glass. Reed went pale. Then he went red. He looked at me and I smiled at him, the way a wife smiles at her husband at a work dinner, and I said, "Reed, are you all right? You look a little flushed." "I'm fine," he said. "Are you sure?" I said. I touched his arm. "You seem tense." The salads came. I ate mine. I asked Doug's wife about her garden. Reed pushed his salad around his plate. Kendra was not eating. The 2 of them were doing a careful dance of not looking at each other, while everyone at the table was, I now realized, watching them very carefully not look at each other. I had wondered in the weeks leading up to this whether anyone at the firm knew. I had my answer. They knew. They had probably known longer than I had. I waited until the entrees came. Filet for Reed, salmon for me. I had timed this. I lifted my purse from the back of my chair. I took out the envelope. I set it on the white tablecloth between Reed's wine glass and his bread plate, and I said in a voice that carried just enough to reach Doug and his wife and the partners across from us, "Honey, I have something for you. I think tonight is the right night." Reed looked at the envelope like it was a small animal that had crawled onto his plate. "What is it?" he said. "Open it," I said. He didn't move. Doug's wife had stopped talking. Across the table, I could feel the silence spreading, the way a stain spreads on linen. "Open it, Reed." He picked up the envelope. His hands were not steady. He slid out the contents, top page first. The top page was my OB's letterhead, with a clear, signed, dated statement that I was in normal reproductive health for a woman of my age, with full hormonal panel attached. Underneath that was a copy of his forged Dr. Reinhardt report, marked up by Carr in red pen, with annotations like fake letterhead, stock logo, signature does not match Dr. Reinhardt's published signature, and at the bottom, in her clean nurse practitioner handwriting, falsified document. Underneath that was a printed page of his credit card statements, with the wine bar and the jewelry store and the hotel in River North highlighted in yellow. Underneath that was a single photograph. taken by my investigator, of Reed and Kendra leaving a hotel together at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning when he had told me he was at the gym. Underneath that was the divorce petition, 15 pages, with a sticky tab on the signature page. He went through them one at a time. The whole table watched. He did not have the presence of mind to close the envelope or hide anything. By the time he got to the photograph, the color had completely drained from his face, and Kendra had put her hand over her mouth, and Doug had set his fork down, and the partner across from us, a woman named Rachel, was looking at me with an expression I will remember for the rest of my life, which was not pity, it was respect. "Congratulations, by the way," I said to Reed very quietly, but quietly enough that Kendra heard me too. "On the baby. I hope she has your eyes." Reed opened his mouth. He closed it. He opened it again. "How long have you known?" he said. "Long enough," I said. "Long enough," I said. He looked at Kendra. Kendra was crying, silent tears, the napkin pressed to her mouth, and I felt, in that moment, for her, because she had not known either. She had not known about the forged report. I could see it in her face. She had thought she was building something with a man who was getting out of an unhappy marriage. She was learning in real time in front of his bosses that he had lied to both of us. Reed stood up. He sat back down. He stood up again. "We should talk about this," he said. "At home." "There's nothing to talk about," I said. "There's a process now. You'll want a lawyer." I stood up. I picked up my purse. I looked at Doug, who had been kind to me for 9 years, and I said, "Doug, I'm sorry. I didn't want to do this to you, but I wasn't going to let him have one more dinner where he got to be the man you all thought he was." Doug nodded, slowly. I walked out of the steakhouse. I got into a cab. I did not look back. Halfway home, somewhere on Lakeshore Drive, I started laughing, and I could not stop laughing, and the cab driver looked at me in the rearview mirror and asked if I was okay, and I said, "Sir, I think I'm going to be. There's a part I want to tell you about that doesn't fit anywhere else, but I think it matters. My mother died when I was 23. She had been married to my father for 31 years, and she had stayed in that marriage through things I won't go into here, things that were smaller than what Reed did to me, but in some ways worse because they happened a little bit at a time over decades. When I was 12, she sat me down on my bed and she said, 'If a man ever tries to make you feel small, you remember whose daughter you are. You don't get loud, you don't get crazy. You get quiet, and you get smart, and you wait.'" I thought about her every day of those 8 weeks. The white casserole dish, the one with the hairline crack, was hers. I had used it the night Reed told me I would never be a mother because I had wanted some small piece of her with me at the table, even though I did not know yet, consciously, that I would need her. The morning after Vermilion, I took that dish out of the cabinet and I held it for a long time, and then I put it back. It is still on the second shelf in my kitchen. I use it every Sunday. The divorce went through 9 months later. He didn't fight it. He couldn't, with the documentation I had. He moved out within a week of the dinner into Kendra's apartment, and then out of Kendra's apartment within 3 months, because it turned out that Kendra had her own opinions about a man who would forge a medical document about his wife. She had the baby in October, a girl, and as far as I know, Reed sees her every other weekend and pays what the court told him to pay and is not, by any measure I can find, a particularly involved father. I am sorry for that little girl. She did not ask for any of this. I kept the house. I kept my retirement. I kept the version of myself that I had rebuilt during those 8 weeks, which turned out to be a version I liked better than the one I had been before. I am 39 now. I am dating a man named Theo who teaches high school history and who, on our 3rd date, told me he wanted me to know up front that he was divorced and that his ex-wife was not a bad person. And I knew then that I was going to be okay, because I could tell the difference now between a man who tells the truth when it costs him something and a man who lies when it doesn't cost him anything. That difference is the whole game. I just didn't know it before. A friend asked me recently if I regretted the dinner, if I wished I had handled it privately. I thought about it for a long time. I said no, finally. I said no, because Reed had wanted to humiliate me privately, in our kitchen, with a fake report and a false story, and let me carry that humiliation alone for the rest of my life. The dinner was not revenge. The dinner was the truth, returned to its proper address in front of the people he had been lying to for over a year. I think about that envelope sometimes. Plain manila, bought at Office Depot for 99 cents. The cheapest, most ordinary object in that whole expensive room, and it held everything. If you are out there, and your husband is telling you something about your body that you don't believe, I want you to know two things. The first is that your instincts are not crazy. Listen to them. The second is that you don't have to get loud. You don't have to get crazy. You can get quiet, and you can get smart, and you can wait. And then, when you're ready, you can set the envelope down on the table. Have you ever known something in your gut before you could prove it? Tell me about it in the comments. I read all of them. I think about that kitchen sometimes. The white casserole dish with the hairline crack. The chicken and rice cooling on the stove. The exact shade of the cabinets in the late afternoon light. I think about the woman I was that night, holding a serving spoon while her husband told her she was broken, and I want to walk back through time and put my hand on her shoulder and tell her something. I want to tell her that the worst thing Reed did was not the lie. The worst thing Reed did was bet, with his whole life, that I would not be smart enough to catch him. That bet is the thing I want you to take from this. Because every cruelty in my marriage, every brick Reed laid in that wall between us, came from a single root, which was contempt. He thought I was small. He thought I was simple. He thought I would cry and accept and shrink, and that he could walk out of our marriage with his reputation intact and a baby in another woman's arms and the sympathy of every person we knew. He did not understand that the woman he had married had a mother who taught her, at 12 years old, that the loudest woman in the room is almost never the strongest one. My mother taught me to wait. She taught me that patience is not weakness. She taught me that a woman who keeps her hands steady while she gathers what she needs cannot be defeated by a man who underestimates her. The cause of what happened to Reed at that steakhouse was not me. The cause was Reed. He chose every single day for over a year to lie. He chose to forge a medical document. He chose to humiliate me privately so he could leave me cleanly. Every choice was a seed, and seeds grow. I did not destroy his life. I simply showed everyone in one room the harvest of what he had been planting in the dark. If you take anything from my story, take this: your character is not what you do when people are watching. Your character is what you do when you are certain no one is. Reed was certain. He was wrong. And to the woman reading this, who is in the middle of something, who has felt that small cold feeling in her chest, who knows in her body that something is not right, even though she cannot prove it yet, I want to say one more thing. Trust yourself. The instinct came before the proof for a reason. You do not need to confront anyone yet. You do not need to be brave yet. You just need to start writing things down, in a notebook, in a place no one else looks. You need to let the smart, quiet part of yourself do its job. Strength is not always loud. Sometimes strength is a manila envelope, bought for 99 cents, set down on a white tablecloth in a room full of people who needed to see what was inside. Sometimes strength is the 8 weeks before you set it down. And sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is keep her hands steady, and her eyes open and her mouth shut, until the moment is hers.